Peter. And we'd asked Peter to talk today about the urban growth boundary because he is such an expert in it. And I felt like a lot of our newer agents might not even know what that is. And for all of us, it's just something to think about as we move into this future of low inventory for, for now and for who knows how long it'll last. So, Peter, share your knowledge and let us know how we can help.
So everybody can hear me? By the way, if anybody's looking for 4 acres for about 300,000 out towards Colton, let me know. It was a great listing appointment this morning. Anyway, so how many of you have worked with buyers that came to you and said they would like a new home on a large lot and say 450 or 500,000 these days? And you go out and look and you find that all of the homes that are recently built are on 5 to 7 or 7 to 9 or sometimes 3 to 5,000 square foot lots. Anybody raise their hand? I can't see half the people. Yeah. That's because unless you've got a lot of money, they don't exist. And the reason they don't exist is because of the urban growth boundary. And the urban growth boundary is a politically defined or man-made or defined boundary around every city in the state of Oregon that determines where development can occur. And development can only occur within the urban growth boundary until a certain level of density is reached. And then they extend that into either the urban reserve or the rural reserve or whatever. And so basically there is currently a plan, I believe it's through 2050, that defines how growth will occur in the state of Oregon. And the original idea was, and still is, to preserve farmland and recreational land. So Oregon is one of the few places that I know of that you can be driving down a street. Rosemont in West Lynn's a good example. And if you're going north to south on Rosemont, on the left-hand side, there's beautiful executive developments. And on the right-hand side, there's 20 acres. I can tell you how many times I've shown that area and somebody says, well, I want to build my house over there. And then I'd like to build one for my mother-in-law. And the answer is unequivocally, unless it's a distress, no, you can't do that, because the right side of the road is 20 acre minimums and the left side of the road is subdivisions, because we are driving down, in that particular case, we're driving down the urban growth boundary. So Austin, if you're there, I'm going to share my screen, if that's possible to do.
Okay, wait, Austin is not here today, but if
you there it is. I got it.
Bottom, yeah.
See if this will work. Okay. So this is the urban growth boundary around Portland. And I'm going to look for one other one here, if you'll excuse me for a minute. I want one with another example. Did a new one pop up? No, that won't work very well anyway. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but basically, if you were in West Lynn, this is probably Rosemont Road right here. And these are all subdivisions over here. And on this side of the road is 20 acre minimums. So they've gone in and they've defined, and there is a website. If you Google urban growth boundaries, you can go to a website and you will be able to read about the philosophy behind it and have pictures of where the growth is going next. And so the urban reserves, there's some areas around West Lynn that probably won't happen because there's too many people with good attorneys there. Okay, I was joking. but it defines everywhere you can go. So it will, if you have a buyer and they want a large lot, you're looking for a home that is not new construction for the most part, unless they're in the $1 million price range. So in 1988, when we were building in West Lynn, the average size of a lot was between 10 to 15,000 square feet. Hidden Springs Estates at the top of the hill there was an example that was built between the mid 80s to maybe 1990. The next subdivisions that were done went from 10 to 15,000 square feet down to 7 to 9,000 square feet. And they went down to 5 to 7,000 square feet and so on and so forth. And these days, if they build a new subdivision, you can borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor by opening your kitchen window and sticking your arm out, because the lots have gotten smaller. So it will save, if you have a clear understanding of this, it will save you a lot of time in looking for homes for buyers. And if you have someone is not familiar, or a buyer that is not familiar with the urban growth boundary, you can immediately become their real estate expert by having a rudimentary understanding of what it is and how it limits growth. And people who are coming from out of town, out of state particularly, need to understand this, because it is one of the value propositions, in my view, of Oregon as a place to live. You go across to Vancouver, and people are going to go move over there for tax reasons these days, but Vancouver accommodates what we call urban sprawl. And the urban growth boundary, when I'm explaining it to people, I tell them that our biggest fear was becoming a Los Angeles, and this is what keeps that from happening. Does that make any sense? So that's kind of what it is. And I don't talk to any out-of-state buyers in our consultations that I don't bring this up, because once again, it makes you look a whole lot smarter than your competition. If you're fighting with another agent or another company for a buyer's attention, this is the kind of information that will differentiate you and allow them to move forward with you. So let me see if I can find, without taking too much time, anything.
That's great info, Peter. I'm sure a lot of our agents aren't talking about it as much as you are in your meetings.
And so just one second here. I'm going to see if I can find anything that has the urban reserves on it. And so far the answer is I can't find what I'm looking for.
Hey, Peter, would you address how hard it is to get a property included into the urban growth boundary? I think we all get calls from landowners that see development across the street or up the street, and they think that because it's so close visually that they're about ready to be developed. Would you talk about that process?
Oh, you mean there's a process, Dwight?
Yes, and a long one.
Well, you've got to go through, city, state, local, and a variety of other organizations in land use development. I don't know that much about it, because in my experience, it's been fairly close to impossible to do. If you've got somebody who has a good portion of their life to spend doing it, go ahead, Dwight. Why don't you speak to that?
The bottom line is that if you have a property that it's not in the urban growth boundary and it's not in the urban reserve, then you have to go through a process to have a vote to be able to include it in the urban reserve. And then once you're included in the urban reserve, you're basically done, because the various cities, along with Metro, choose which properties in the urban reserves around the Tri-County area will be brought in at which time. So for example, there's a lot of demand up in Hillsborough, and they recently brought in 400 acres up in Hillsborough and nothing in West Lynn. And so the variability is so high that, you know, as a practical matter, you could be waiting 10 years to get a property developed that's in the urban reserve. And so you have to be careful, because when you go on listing appointments, that always comes up if they know that development is near. Or they might even say they are in the urban reserve. This comes up often in the Southwest Lynn area, Stafford, that sort of area. And so, you know, if you're not familiar with that process and the timing of that process, and someone wants you to, you know, impute additional value into their land because, you know, the urban reserve is right across the street, you'll find out that you really can't, because just because the urban reserve is even close, let alone the urban growth boundary, there's so much uncertainty around the timing that you can't really impute any additional value to the property. It's very difficult to do. Is that what you've seen, Peter?
So does my screen show the urban growth boundary lookup? Or do I have?
No, it's still showing the map.
Okay, so if I stop sharing this one, whoops, and go back here. So when you get that call and and you want to list a property and you need to know whether it's in the urban growth boundary, there is a website. This is OregonMetro.gov, but I just Google urban growth boundary. And you can go down here and you can put in an address. I'll put in mine, for instance, in Mike Drive, and search. And it says that I am outside the urban growth boundary, but I'm inside the Clackamas County Rural Reserve. And if you look at the blue is the rural reserve, or the green is a rural reserve, the blue is the urban reserve. And even though I'm probably, you know, a mile or less from the urban growth boundary, we won't be developing my property in my lifetime, or probably that of my children. So there is, Dwight pointed out, there is no real value to being located close by, because they look at services and density and all kinds of things, but it's why we are building up instead of out. And it's real easy to go in and find this information. And then if you're new to it and don't understand it, feel free to come and talk with me or Dwight or somebody who's been around. I came with the covered wagons, so I was here when they came up with this idea.
Can you speak to the new single family zoning that's going into place or into effect, and what conversations you're having around that?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The demise of the single family zoning that's happening.
Oh, the changes?
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm not caught up here.
Okay, well, last year, our state, along with, I believe, 4 other states in the United States, voted to eliminate single-family zoning in the entire state. Is this ringing a bell, Peter?
Yeah, that's so we could have, quote, more housing and affordable housing.
Correct. So basically, when that legislation was passed in the state, they gave the cities 2 years to develop the code around their city and how they're going to implement this infill construction. So you can imagine you're a developer and you in 2022, presumably, you apply to do a development of 60 single family lots. That's all going to change. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create more affordable housing within the areas that we already have housing. So in theory, you might see someone in a neighborhood that has a 2,000-foot home on a 20,000-foot lot within the city of Portland, or even the Tri-County area for that matter. And suddenly, with the new infill zoning, they'll be able to build on that lot, potentially up to 4 units in your neighborhood without accommodating parking. And so the angst that's associated with this is California is one of the states that also did this, is what happens to some of the luxury neighborhoods on large lots. Think of, maybe the Stafford area for us. What's going to happen to those and the construction that happens in those neighborhoods. So we're waiting to see how Lake Oswego, how Westland, Beaverton, these local cities adopt the code around that, which will tell us what we can do on our lots, that suddenly you might be able to put 3 units on or 4 units on instead of remodeling your house to enlarge your kitchen. You might remodel your house to add an entire studio or some sort of casita off of it, or just a second 2-bedroom house off the back. So look for that, because we're almost there. They're supposed to roll the code out in 22 in Lake Oswego, for example. So they're going to start having hearings on it this year in 2021. And that's where they're going to get public input, and they'll probably do modifications. But they're basically going to try and create more infill, more density within the urban growth boundary that we already have. And that will change the nature of Portland over the next 20 years, probably more than the urban growth boundary did, would be my guess.
It was interesting listening to an economist end of last week on perspectives, and it was his opinion that our land use, urban growth boundaries and stuff probably will disappear within the next 10 years in order to accommodate affordable housing, which, by the way, he said was more expensive to build than regular houses. So we'll see.
When I was land developing down on the North Coast for those 15 years before I came up here, that was a big issue. And also the wetland issue. So you'd see down the line that they even got into you were able to build in the wetlands as long as you did your thing, but it was weird. And riparian areas too, next to lakes and all. So that can happen, guys. I saw it happening down there.
Yeah, I've had calls from builders already that have asked me what I know about this disappearing single-family zoning and what the impact will be, and are there opportunities that they might be looking for. So if you think about all these guys that were flipping houses for the last, mostly probably started in 2011 or 12, and some of them were flipping 20 and 30 and 40 homes. And now the inventory is super, super expensive. They don't have the opportunities to even buy things to flip. So, and they have construction crews that they've trained. And so now they're looking at the next opportunity, and it's likely going to be something around buying infill lots. So for me, I think about Lake Grove, where I live, which is not far from this office, and there are a lot of 10 to 12,000 foot lots in Lake Grove. And that means that if you have a 2,000 foot house on a 10,000 foot lot, you have a really, really big backyard normally, which is what attracted us to the area. But it's possible that the zoning is going to allow people to sell their homes to builders who would then come in and redesign that home and add 2 units. And so now it's a 3-plex. And one might be studio, one might be 1 bedroom, one might be a 2-bedroom on top of the existing home. That's the argument that's happening out there with this new zoning. So, if if you get calls from people that are asking about that, I suspect when they start having hearings, you know, probably second quarter, first quarter, second quarter of next year, you're going to see it in our communities. We have within reach, we have Sherwood, we have Wilsonville, we have West Lynn, we have Lake Oswego, we get Tiger, just within our franchise area for Keller Williams Portland Premier. So, those communities will be talking to each other, and probably the states will be communicating with each other as they write their code. And this is, like I said, this is going to be the most significant change to our housing stock and our concept of housing since probably we've been selling houses, Peter. And I think it's more significant than the urban growth boundary because it's going to start immediately. And then you're going to see whatever the code allows, that construction will start immediately in an inventory shortage community with low interest rates.
And that seems like that would put a lot of pressure on the urban growth boundary into the future. Right?
Hard to say. Yeah.
We have a couple questions. So let's see. Josh asked, the UGB helps our prices stay high too, right? Because of scarcity. Yeah, it's a big contributor of why we have limited housing available within the Portland area. And then Morgan asked, so are more builders buying up older houses that are in bad condition to tear down and build something new in light of these boundaries?
Well, I think there's a few things going on. I'll speak to that because I have some builders that I literally, while we're on this meeting, I just got texted from one of my very best builders that said he's going to quit building, going to close up his company. And his challenge has been the price of land is so high, and then the cost of materials went up. Lumber, was up 30 to 50%, even more, depending on who you talk to for a while this year. We have a shortage of subs in Oregon, and so he felt like he couldn't make enough profit for all the risk and energy that he was putting into it. So, he can't be alone. There's other builders in the Portland Metro that have not been making money this year. And so that's a whole nother argument. But I think you are going to see, as soon as people know what this code is, then it's going to create an entirely new category of housing for us to sell. That's probably going to start in 2022. People will be probably jockeying for position next fall. And so it's something that as a market center, we will pay attention to, because what it means is that builders could just go in and do things immediately. They won't necessarily have to even bring utilities in. They won't necessarily have to bring streets in. They'll just be building on existing land. And I can tell you this year, 2020, Mike Hoffman in our office is probably has the most at stake of anyone I know in terms of closings that have been held up that need governmental agency approvals. And with COVID, hitting in the spring and then, whatever it did in the summer with agencies, they started to come back to work and try to get caught up. But now we're getting closed down again. He's had massive volume of land deals held up, and that will go away because you're not going to have to take a year to get something planned. I have a builder in Lake Oswego that you used to be able to split a lot. Peter, my memory's not so good, but I think you could split a lot 20 years ago in about 45 days. And then, my latest builder took 9.5 months to split a lot, tear down one house, split it into two, and then take 9 months to build the house. So the process now, instead of, getting the whole thing done in less than a year, is taking nearly 2 years. And, it's just, it's a hard business proposition for people to get their arms around. So, like I said, my thought is that they'll develop the code will be approved, and then boom, we're going to see it everywhere because the builders are hungry for something. So you can see it in any neighborhood almost instantaneously, not like having a 100-lot development go in the ground.
A lot easier. Somebody just asked, where do you find out about this? Just Google single family zoning Oregon, and you will have all that you can deal with.
Yeah, this is a lot of good info.
Yeah, when we know how this is unfolding, we'll definitely be bringing people in that are in the middle of it, right? So it'll be some of the land planners. I think we could get land planners from Lake Oswego to come because we have a Lake Oswego office. So, and hopefully Tiger, we're technically out here somewhere between Portland and Durham, So, we'll bring the people in as this starts to be clear. So far, it's been really quiet. As they develop the code, there have not been hearings that I've heard of yet, but they will as soon as they get their binder put together, and then they're going to start having public hearings on it. So, anyway, that'll be an entirely new source of inventory for us, which would be a good thing. But there'll be a lot of angst around it in neighborhoods.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions for Peter or Dwight on either the single family zoning or the urban growth boundary? Because I know they can be a little bit tricky to understand all the complexities. All right. You explained it so well, Peter. No one else has any questions.
Well, that's one possibility.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Peter, to wrap us up on the UGB?
Well, yeah, it's probably not going to, as Dwight's so aptly pointed out, it's not going to probably make that much difference anymore. I mean, there's an alternative, and good or bad. But I'll be moving to Idaho shortly, so whatever.
You and everybody else, Peter.
Here's a comment. We went on 12 listing presentations in 2 weeks, and 11 of the 12 people were moving out of state. Just saying. Has nothing to do with the urban growth boundary. It was just
Well,
interesting.
Well, over to where? Montana and Idaho and those places?
Idaho, Montana, North Dakota even, and one was
Yeah.
going to Iowa, but that was family issue. But the rest were just getting out of Dodge.
Yeah, our daughter moved over to Wyoming recently.
Yeah.
40 acres up against the BLM's land. So they're in good shape, out in nowhere.
We have one client that's moving to Georgia, southern Georgia, buying what do they call an antebellum house, one of the ones that you would see on Gone with the Wind or whatever, 3,800 square feet on 1 acre. And he talked to the realtor and is listed for $189,000. Just spectacular. And he said, but I talked to the realtor there because I thought it might be overpriced, and the realtor told him, yeah, it was 40,000 over.
And then they're going to have another 100,000 to keep it up.
No, I mean, it was, I've looked at it online. It's absolutely gorgeous. So we're a little expensive here, but it's still the best place on the planet to live. There was an article that a friend sent me from Paris when he was visiting there, and it was either the Wall Street Journal or New York Times European edition. And the article said that, essentially said the next world wars will be over water. And the only place that you really want to live is north of San Francisco and west of the Cascades is going to be the best place to whatever happens next, you want to be here. So I was joking. I'm not going anywhere.
Well,
Except for the earthquake, Peter.
right.
I missed it. Where?
The earthquake, Peter, the place, the Juan de Fuca fault line.
Yes.
Yeah, the big one.
So here's a question for all of us. When your clients are filling out the disclosure and the question comes up, are we in a geographic hazard zone? What's the answer?
Yeah.
Everybody says no, but guess what?
But we are.
We probably all are.
Peter, one last question on those 12 listing appointments that 11 of them were moving out of state. Did you send any of those as referrals through KW?
Is that a serious question? Yes, the ones that didn't already have established realtors, we are working on referring them to Keller Williams agents. There were some places they were going where there wasn't a Keller Williams. And some of them are moving out. It seems like the urban people are moving to the burbs are moving to the country, and the country are moving out of state. But interesting dynamics. We'll see how it plays out when we get rid of Mr. COVID-19 here and get it under control. Things will probably settle down rather dramatically.
It's exciting. The end is in sight, at least with the vaccine. So we're gonna be excited. Stay safe, everyone. And we'll see you on Friday. See you Friday. See you all Friday. Peter, thank you for sharing all your knowledge. Dwight and Robin as well. And see all of you on Friday. All you have to do is drive through.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
All right, bye.
Have a good day.